Hey everybody, my name is Jerry Clark and I have been a paramedic for about 25 years. And I've been invited today to tell you a little bit about one call. And in 25 years, I've had probably tens of thousands of calls, so one call sticking out is kind of a big deal. Since you're ready to learn about electrical emergencies, this is a very fitting call. So about 9 years ago, I was a paramedic with Peninsula EMS over in Crystal Beach. Now at the time, there was only one paid ambulance and the other two were staffed by only volunteers. So my partner and I received a call from a guy that fell off a ladder. That was all the information that we had. So we went to the call expecting a guy fell from a ladder. We didn't know if it was a 3-foot ladder, a 10-foot ladder, 24-foot. We really didn't know what we were getting into. So as we round the corner, the first thing I noticed was there was a group of people doing CPR on one dude. I was like, whoa, doesn't seem like a fall from a ladder type of call. And as we approached, I realized there was another guy on the ground about 10 feet away from the first guy. So when we got out the truck, it was explained loudly by a bystander that one guy was on the top of the ladder, one guy was on the bottom of the ladder, and they were moving the ladder to paint the eaves of a 3-story house. So this was about a 45-foot extension ladder. The ladder tipped and hit a high voltage power line, knocking the guy from the top to the ground and knocking the other guy to the ground as well. So suddenly it wasn't a fall from a ladder type of call. It was actually two guys who were electrocuted by high voltage power lines. The first thing I did, scene safety, look around. The ladder was on the ground. There was no sparks or arcs from the power line. We were good. I glanced over at the first guy who had bystander CPR in progress, and I told him, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep that up. And I went to check on the other guy. So the other guy was at the bottom of the ladder when it hit the high voltage lines. The first thing I noticed was that he had black marks on both of the palms of his hands, and both of his shoes were split open. His socks were split open, and all of his toes were burnt to a crisp. Great. He was agonal breathing. I reached down and felt for a pulse, and there was no pulse. I got up and went to the other guy. They're doing CPR. This guy had his boots completely blown off. There were no boots on his feet at all. His socks were filleted open, and all of his toes were missing, and the stumps of his feet were burned. And now he fell 45 feet to the ground as well. Checked the pulse on him, and he had none. I realized then I did not have help coming. So I called for 2 helicopters because the other ambulances that were supposed to be staffed with volunteers, they weren't staffed. I got my partner to get out 2 backboards while I got the ALS equipment, and I brought the patients on backboards close enough to each other that I could put the monitor in the middle. I only had one monitor. I put the pads on the first guy. He was in VFib. Shocked him, and I actually got a rhythm back. Put pads on the second guy, also in VFib. Shocked him, still in VFib. He's my priority. Started the IV, had both patients being bagged with bystanders, gave him 1 epi, shocked him again, got a rhythm back. Both guys now had pulses. Started an IV on the second guy, intubated both, and then loaded one at a time into the ambulance. I had one on the bench seat, one on the stretcher, and I brought bystanders with me. Is anybody available to help me out here? We're in Crystal Beach. It's off season. Not a lot of people around. And we're going to land 2 helicopters at the volunteer fire station about 2 miles away. Once we're in the back of the ambulance, second IVs went into both patients, and I only had 1 lidocaine drip. We didn't carry a whole lot of medicine 10 years ago. So the one guy who converted with lidocaine got the lidocaine drip. The other guy went ahead and gave him an epi, gave him some fluids, and we're bagging both patients all the way to the volunteer fire station. Once we got there, we had 2 Life Flight helicopters land, and I'll show you the picture of that. It was actually pretty cool. And both patients were taken away one at a time, both with solid, strong carotid pulses. It was one of those calls that just stands out because I can look back at it now and think, how did that happen? But the one thing that I remember in doing my assessments on both patients that the electricity found its way to ground. Electricity will always find its way to ground. The inside where the electricity went into their body, through their hands and out through their feet, went the fastest way to ground. So of course everything from the palm of the hand to the sole of the foot was burned on the inside. That led to pulmonary edema. It led to VFib in both patients. It led to a smell that, if you've never smelled it, once you do, you'll never forget the smell of roasting person. Ultimately, neither patient survived from farther out than 2 weeks. But I was able to at least give their family time to come up and say goodbye and give them a fighting chance if they had one. Make sure that you check your scene safety. Now, my bystanders at that scene were actually very helpful. It could have gone the other way. They could have gotten in my way. I only had enough equipment to do certain things for both patients. I had to share a monitor, which was pretty difficult to take out the unplug and replug and remember which patient was which and check on them back and forth. I had a portable pulse ox on one while I had the monitor on the other, trying to make sure that they were getting properly ventilated, making sure that they retained their pulses throughout the entire call. And it worked. It wouldn't work every time. I've seen it not work, but it worked that time. Made sure my scene was safe, made sure that I had the help coming. When I didn't hear the other ambulances come en route, I didn't hear the volunteer fire department come en route, I called for the helicopters immediately. Luckily, it was a pretty day, the helicopters were flying. I was 45 minutes from the nearest trauma center. I could not keep these guys alive for 45 minutes in an ambulance. Not with the tools I had, not with the personnel I had. They started swelling and smelling pretty quickly. So I treated them as burn patients and gave them massive loads of fluid. Tried to keep their body heat in, because when we're cooked, our body heat escapes, our core temperature actually goes down. You feel the heat coming off, like a sunburn, you feel that heat coming off. The core temperature is decreasing as that heat is let off the body. So we made sure we covered them up. We had them in shock positions on the backboard. We gave them a fighting chance. And with electricity, that quick defibrillation is definitely the key. The heart is wigging out because it got an electrical pulse it doesn't understand. We need to shock it back into something that we can work with. Even though most of the time, through other electrocutions I've worked, other electrical emergencies, you shock that first time and it goes straight to asystole. Well, at least then you have something to work with, because you can't work with VFib. A lot of the times we can get the heart back up and running. It just depends on what damage is done in the rest of the body. So we have to look at where the electricity entered and where it exited the body, and just imagine a line all the way through the body from the entrance to the exit wound, because anything in that path has been affected. Everything from the lungs, the internal organs, the central nervous system. You have to think about the full scale of what just happened. Make sure that you're doing a complete assessment on an electrical patient, even if they're conscious, because even if it doesn't zap their heart into VFib or stop it altogether, you're gonna have an electrical path inside the body. Sometimes you're lucky and it's on the surface and you can actually see that. I've seen people get struck by lightning and you can see on the surface of the body where that electricity went, especially if they're wet. You can actually see it. It's red, it looks like spider webs. It's kind of cool to see. If you don't see anything on the outside except for 2 holes in and out, you have to assume that everything on the inside, the path of least resistance, is going to be in a state of getting cooked. Do what you can. Remember to be safe for yourself. Remember to watch all your bystanders for safety. Power lines in the water are a big deal. Power lines on cars, make sure that they're completely off before you try, because remember, we are the ones that got to go home every day. So be safe. Hope you enjoyed my little story, your introduction to electrical emergencies with Julianne. And if you have any questions for me, I'll leave my email address with her and you can ask me direct. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the call that you might have, and any other questions you might have about my experiences, My history: 16 years with Galveston EMS, a few years with Clear Cypress Creek EMS, other services here and there. Any questions you may have, I'll be happy to answer. My email will be at the end of the presentation. Thank you guys a lot. Have a good day. Enjoy your training. Stay safe. Be nice. Have fun.